In this next technique lesson, I want to talk to you about the best way to hit your cymbals. You'd be surprised how many drummers play their cymbals completely wrong or have their cymbals set up completely wrong for the way that their kit is positioned. Now, the first thing I want to tell you is don't set up your cymbals for show. Okay, if you want your cymbals really, really high, that's not the best way to play them, but if that's the way you want them so people think you're cool, well, you can go ahead and do that, but you probably aren't going to get the best sound out of them. You might not get the best groove. I can't say that for certain. I'm just saying if you want to play in a position that's most natural for your body, then your cymbals should be at a height that's very, very comfortable. So first thing to notice is all my cymbals at a height that's very comfortable for me. I have long arms. Like I can reach that, almost reach those without even leaning over at all, and I can reach all these cymbals here, even though they're very, very high. Okay, now when I have a stick in my hand, I can easily reach that, easily reach these splashes, and everything over here. So everything's right there. I don't have to twist, I don't have to turn, everything's right there. And so that's the first thing I'm going to tell you when you set up your cymbals. The second thing I want to tell you is don't put them completely flat, or don't angle them away from you. Angle them slightly towards you. Now, I know this is personal preference, and some teachers are going to say, oh, don't tell people to do that. But I'm going to tell you to do that. Just angle them slightly towards you. It doesn't have to be like, you know, jazz style. Like I know some of you younger guys are going to say, oh, I don't want it to be like that because you want to really crash on, which is totally cool, and I totally understand that. I'm the same way. I play a lot of rock and pop, so I don't want them positioned like this, right? I want them just angled slightly towards me. And this is beneficial for how we're going to actually hit the cymbals. Now, when we hit the crash, we don't hit through it. Okay? If you hit through it, you're going to do one of two things. You're going to put a ton of pressure on the cymbal up here. Okay? And in here, and in this bell, and what'll happen, and this might have happened to you guys before, is it's going to crack along this outer edge, or it's going to start to crack right where it sits on the cymbal stand. The second thing that could happen is it could start cracking where you're hitting it here. If you're hitting through it, and you're putting a lot of pressure on the cymbal, then it could easily crack there. Okay? And so you don't want to do that, especially when you're spending a ton of money on cymbals. Like these cymbals are worth a lot of money, and I do not want to break them at all. So how do you hit your cymbal then? If you're not supposed to hit through it, what are you supposed to do? Obviously, these things are meant for bashing, right? And that is absolutely true. You're meant to bash these, and I want you to be able to hit them and actually really, really have a lot of energy when you're playing your drums. So what I do is I use a couple different methods. The first one is I hit the cymbal and glance off. Hit the cymbal, glance off. Glance off, either this way or this way. I'll just play a little bit and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so I was never at risk of cracking my cymbals playing them that way. And I think they still sounded great. I think it still looked good. It still looked like there's energy there within the groove. Now, the next thing you can do is you can practice hitting them dead on, but then accepting the rebound of the drumstick. That would look like this. And so that's the best way to crash a cymbal. So especially if you're like one of those really hard rock, heavy metal drummers, you don't want to chew through cymbals and stuff like that. They're very expensive and they're very personal. Like I have cymbals from 10 years ago and I would be heartbroken if they actually broke. I don't want them to break. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is your ride cymbal. How do you hit the ride cymbal? Well, on the ride cymbal, there's many different areas that you can hit it. Okay? There's the bell, and then there's this section called the bow, and then there's the edge of the cymbal. Now, depending on your ride cymbal, you could actually crash it as well and hit it on the edge. Because I have so many crashes here, my ride is set up just for riding, and I rarely crash it. So let's just practice hitting the bell. There's two ways we can do that. We can hit it with the tip or the edge of the drumstick. Okay, so you hit it like that or like this. Now, when you're playing a groove, when you're playing a fill and you want to hit the bell, obviously you have to be very, very accurate, and you have to know exactly what you're going to do. So your hand positioning, if you're going to hit the bell, would be this. Your hand positioning, if you're going to hit the bell with the tip, would be this. Okay, so see how that changes? Let's just practice hitting the bell with the tip and the edge of the stick. And that's the best way to do that. Just kind of jam around and practice your accuracy with the bell of the cymbal. The next thing you can do, and this is the most common, is just playing the bow part of the cymbal. And there's many different areas. You know, if you play it closer to this the bell, then it's going to sound a little bit shorter, and it's probably going to be a little bit more articulate. If you play it closer to the edge of the bow, or the edge of the cymbal, then it's going to sound a little bit more open, and it's going to probably sound almost more like a crash depending on your cymbal. So what I'll do is I'll play it and I'll show you the different sounds, how it sounds close to the bell and all the way to the edge. Another cool thing you can do with all your cymbals is you can hit the edge just like this. This is something I originally saw Dom Famularo do, and he's a great showman when he plays on the kit. But he can do these kind of things really, really fast. He has a ton of cymbals to do it with. And that just sounds like this. Now that gives you a different sound altogether. Now another thing you can do with all of your cymbals is you can do what's called choking. And that's not like this choking or anything like that. That's where you hit the cymbals and just grab it and stop the sound instantly with your hand. So you can do it one of two ways. You can hit the cymbal with your hand as well as grab it with your hand, or you can hit the cymbal with your hand and grab it with your other hand. Okay, so those two ways look like this. Either way you choose to do it, it's all what fits the beat or what fits the fill or what fits the style of music. A lot of times it's for show, so you'll do a double hit as well as grab both the cymbals at the same time. Now the final thing I want to talk about relating to cymbals is the hi-hat. This is probably one of my favorite parts of the drum set. It's between the hi-hat, snare, and the bass drum. But how you play the hi-hat can dictate the feel of the song. It could dictate the tempo of the song, especially when you're writing and stuff like that. And it's so useful in so many different elements and in so many different styles, it's unbelievable. And so I first want to talk about the most common way and the way you should be playing grooves and the way you should be hitting the hi-hat when you learn new beats. And that is what I call the shoulder tip method. Okay, the shoulder tip is basically you hit the hi-hat with the shoulder of the stick here on counts 1, 2, 3, 4, and on all the ends you hit it with the tip of the stick. Right, so it goes 1 and 2, and 3, and 4, and. So there's a little bit of the molar method coming in here. So I'll show you how this sounds. Okay, sorry, I'm getting a little bit carried away there. I just love these hi-hats, and I love the dynamic that the hi-hat can add to your grooves. Okay, so that's the first thing you can do, shoulder, tip. The next thing you can do to play the hi-hats that adds a completely different dynamic is just open them a little bit with your foot. And now when you hit them, it'll sound like this. Now another thing I like to do on the hi-hats is just open and close them within a beat. So if you're playing a groove, open it on the end of 4 to give the beat a little bit of a different dynamic. Now this takes a little bit of practice, and you need to start very, very simple. Okay, so just practice opening the hi-hat once per groove, or once every 4 bars of a groove, and then start adding it more and more, and then practice opening the hi-hat 2 parts within a groove, and then 3 parts, and just more and more, and eventually you're going to come up with these very, very different sounding grooves, and you could actually take a very basic groove and turn it into something awesome, or something very different from what it was originally, just by opening up the hi-hat. So I'll show you how that sounds. And the final thing that I like to do with my hi-hat is just open it with my foot on many different counts within the bar. What I would recommend practicing is just on quarter notes, so on the counts 1, 2, 3, 4, on all the ands, so the 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and, or some people call them the upbeats, and then all the eighth notes. So what I'll do is I'll put my right hand on my ride cymbal and just try and follow my hi-hat and see where is it going within the bar. So as you can see, we have many different options available to us. Even if you just have a ride, a crash, and a set of hi-hats. You know, you still have lots of things that you can do. You can experiment and get 10, 50, 100 different sounds out of just your hi-hat. Same with the ride cymbal, same with the crash cymbal. And so just experiment with it and just jam around with it, just like I was doing. And that's kind of your assignment for this lesson. I really just want you to get on the kit and just start being creative with these different voices that you might not have been creative with up to this point. You might just be playing the snare drum and the toms. You might be into like, fast bass drum technique, but you're missing out on a lot with just even the hi-hat. Even if you just say, I'm going to work on just the hi-hat this week. Just experiment with that for an hour and then go ahead and move on to the next lesson.